Hey, John.
Oh, we're back. We're back. We're back. How been a busy day. It's been a busy day, but I really am looking forward to this. This is
I am as well. You teased us all with the Faerie Queene
yeah.
on yesterday's show.
Yeah, the first guy that I met who had read the Faerie Queene was orientation week at the University of Chicago. And I had kind of a fire hose exposure to Shakespeare and the great books at Exeter. And I thought I was, fairly well read. And all of a sudden he was a morbidly obese young man. He was 18 years old and was huge. And I said to him, "What's your favorite book?" Yeah, because what else do you say at the University of Chicago, right? What's your favorite book? You're talking to somebody you've never met. You just say, "I want to take your temperature here, gauge who you are as an intellectual." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, Faerie Queene. Like there could be no other book as your favorite book." And I remember thinking, I think I know who wrote that. I could probably give you a name for that if I really stretched. But to meet a young man that had not only read it, but clearly reread it, multiple times and loved it, was a real, wow, maybe I'm not the smartest man in the room. And I think it's remained that way. I really have never read that book closely. I've got because of Troubled Blood, I have a full shelf of astrological interpretations of this. I own the Spencer Encyclopedia, which I recommend to anybody because it has the most magnificent articles in it. Like you want to read about Eros and Cupid inside Spencer, and you do because that's so important to understanding Strike. You go to the Spencer Encyclopedia, and there's an article that lays out Eros versus Anteros, the stuff that we talk about here. I think Rowling must have a copy of the Spencer Encyclopedia. It'll be on the white section of her library, Nick.
I feel such a fraud because I found the phrase "troubled blood" inside Faerie Queene. As soon as Troubled Blood as a title was released, I basically did a text search within the Western canon using Gutenberg, and I found it. It was in Faerie Queene, and it was in an obscure play by Chapman, the guy that did the Homeric translations. And I thought Spencer was more likely, but that was my limit of knowledge. I didn't even, I'd heard of Spencer, I'd heard of the Faerie Queene, and that's it. It's in my reading list for my reread for Troubled Blood prior to the publication of the Hallmark Man. So I've got the Faerie Queene queued up. I've got a study guide as well because I recognise that I'm unlikely to make much headway without a lead in to this book. It's written in archaic English. Even for the time it was written, it's archaic.
Yes, but intentionally, yeah. Wow. What to say about it? Well, the first thing I need to say is that the Wikipedia article on Troubled Blood does not mention Philip Spencer. That, and probably too many people who read that just skip over all of the epigraphs that begin each chapter. And only, I think, real Spencerians, and I'm talking about my friends Elizabeth Baird-Hardy and Beatrice Groves, immediately recognized the epigraph quotations. And we're like, oh, so this chapter is going to be about this. That's a whole level of study that, again, those secret enclaves of the legion of Spencerians. But it is, I think it's a touchstone. It has to. Spencer doesn't appear on. I don't think Rowling has ever mentioned Philip Spencer in any of her interviews. It didn't appear in any of. We made that list. I mean, I made the first list, and then you and Beatrice augmented it so much that it became our list. of all the mentions that she's made on Twitter and in interviews and such, and no mention of Philip Spencer.
No.
Which was a real comeuppance. I mean, we did have that library.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really a reference to a book, right? That could have come out of a book of quotations.
Which we know she's used before.
That's right. And it's really the great virtue of Troubled Blood is that this is where Rowling comes out of the Spencerian closet as not only a serious reader of Spencer, but someone who is familiar with the Spencerian scholarship. Yesterday I talked about the astrological clock. That's from Spencer's scholarship, that he is writing these books on an astrological frame. And she embeds the astrological clock. I mean, just think about having to plot that out in terms of which chapter this thing was going to happen and such.
I mean, that matrix, that grid that we know she uses, that wouldn't be sufficient. That wouldn't be enough.
No, we don't. I love Ibid and all our friends at the Rowling Library, and they published a book about those grids. I published my thing to say, no, it's not the stupid grids, still, that book's worth. If you really want to understand, you want to see some intense scholarship.
Yeah.
They gathered, probably the heaviest hitters among Potter pundits, and got them to take a look at that. You, of course, Nick, were too busy to contribute. Shame on you. Anyway,
I sit here abashed. We should explain to people what we're doing.
Okay. Why is John in his garage, Nick? What is that?
Yeah. Well, we put John in his garage in stifling temperatures all the way out in Oklahoma City. We've
Actually,
sat
much closer
near,
to me, Nick, probably than they are to you in Wales. But
that's true. That's true. Well, they've plonked me in deepest, darkest Wales, next to this lake, in danger of flooding at any second, in honor of J.K. Rowling's 60th birthday. Now, John and I are both Nipponophiles, not to say Nipponophones. We're both great fans of Japanese civilization and their traditions. And one of their traditions is to specially celebrate the 60th birthday. And the reason why that's special is they have a calendar of 12 Chinese astrological signs. And this calendar cycles around the 5 Chinese elements to create a full calendar of 60 years. So when somebody celebrates their 60th birthday, they've essentially gone round the calendar, and they're now at the point at which they came in, which is a symbolic rebirth. They get dressed up as a completely ridiculous adult baby. We're not expecting J.K. Rowling to get in on the act to such an extent, but it is a huge deal. So all friends, families, colleagues all come round to celebrate this with the lucky person that has reached their Kanreki.
Now, Nick, if she does dress up with the red cap and the thing, the whole outfit, we'll know that she's been listening to what we've been saying.
Yes, and now you've raised that possibility. Of course, it's what we all hope will happen. So if your publicists are listening, your most devoted fans are expecting this of you. So I still haven't explained what we are doing in the lake and the shed. So we are basically embodying J.K. Rowling's metaphor for her creative process. So she explained on a BBC radio programme, The Museum of Curiosities, how her inspiration works. And the metaphor she uses is her inspiration, those ideas that come from her, she envisages coming out of a lake. as sort of molten, unformed, glass-like things. And they come from her subconscious. They come from her unresolved issues. And then what she needs to do with those ideas is form them. And she does that over with John in his shed, using her artistry, her literary devices, her craftsmanship as a wordsmith to create the literature we all know and love. So what we thought we'd do to celebrate is we would go through each of her published works. We would pick one item from the lake and one item from the shed, and we would talk about those lake and shed ideas in that work. Now, some works are just too dense in good stuff to get away with one episode, such as The Troubled Blood. So we're doing this in two parts. So we're now on to the second part of the Troubled Shed. Troubled Blood.
Anyone who thinks that Deathly Hallows deserved 2 episodes, I agree. But I wrote an entire book about Deathly Hallows, and you can go read that book if you want more shed about Deathly Hallows. So, Kanreki, here we are. It's funny. Yesterday we did the astrological elements, lake and shed for Troubled Blood, and we mentioned it like halfway through the episode. Oh yeah, this whole thing is astrological. Now we're going to talk about Troubled Blood. I want to talk about, and one thing that we mentioned yesterday as well is that Rowling's library and her favorite books have to be considered part of her unconscious and subconscious mind.
Yeah.
She described well before, as in some of her first interviews, she described her inspiration as coming off the pile of books that she's read. And this is a very large pile of books, as that library revealed. And that she does close reading. She reads like a writer. She wants to see how it's done. For which I think we can thank her teacher in her comprehensive. If anybody knows where she can be found, is it Lucy Shepherd?
Lucy Shepherd.
If Lucy Shepherd is out there, Lucy, please talk to us. We want to know for sure what those A-level reading list was about. Not only do I not claim to be a Spencerian, you'll hear me say Philip Spencer as often as you'll hear me say Edmund Spencer. And that's shameful. I also always spell Spencer with a C. And that is supposedly unforgivable among Spencerians.
Yeah. I pulled out that post. It was a comment on a Hog Pro post, I think, where I said I found this phrase "Troubled Blood" in Spencer, and I spelt it with a C. Beatrice, being so polite, never pointed it out to me.
Well, you were talking about wanting to read the Faerie Queene.
Yeah.
You do need notes, Nick. It's a long book, but it's not this long. But the helps are really a help.
Yeah.
Not only with the antiquated language, but with the references that unless you really are a Spanish Armada fetishist, there's just simply no way that you get all these asides. This is A.C. Hamilton's masterwork. And then there's the Spencer Encyclopedia, which is ridiculously expensive. You definitely should go to bookfinder.com to see if you can find a used edition. But here's the thing about the Spencerians, Nick, is they don't sell their used books. Wow. This has been such a treasure to me. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Then there's the critical biography. I like Andrew Hadfield's. Anyway, there he is. And then there's Mirrors of Celestial Grace by Weatherby. And Patristic Theology and Spencer's Allegory That is astonishing. Anyway, so and I've got in my library I've got a shelf of these things. I don't think any other book has inspired me to go on such a buying binge as Troubled Blood. And I did that when you found out that Troubled Blood was almost certainly from that. Now, it could be the thing from Chapman, because especially in light of what we've found out since through Beatrice Groves and her works with Keats, because Keats is most famous for on reading Chapman's Homer, one of his famous poems. But I know that the people at Hogwarts Professor were really cheering for the Edmund Spencer, go around. That is as much a part of Rowling's makeup, I think, as the three authors that she always names as her favorite. Yeah. That these kind of books and their embedded artistry, which is subliminal, is the kind of work that she loves, and that she gets. Hence the literary alchemy, hence the astrological structure of these things. I've done a lot of the work bringing this stuff out. I think I've been, the pioneer in this stuff. And one of the things you realize is you haven't begun to really do the work. That's evident if you look at the stuff I've written about Talbot's True Book, in that the more time you spend with those illustrations, the author has embedded illustrations inside the work that are laden with occult and traditional symbols and references. Salvia coagula is on one of the pages. And if you look closely at it, and I have, you'll find out that each one of those pages that actually has, a symbol on it, has an embedded 3-card tarot spread in it. Well, this is absolutely mind-blowing. And then there are clues to how it finishes. We get a scarab beetle next to an Ankh cross, which is the pointer to where Margot Bamborough's body is. Anyway, you can read all that stuff down below in the links about Troubled Blood. Today, what can you tell us about the lake side of Troubled Blood? Okay. Other than this, just obviously that she loves Philip Spencer, Edmund Spencer, Bobby Spencer, Eddie Spencer.
Good old.
How about Spencer? Spencer. We can call him Spencer, so I can spell it with a C and an S.
So I'm gonna talk about a really dark period in Rowling's life, and dark as in we just don't know a lot about it. So Troubled Blood is very geographically specific. There's a lot of time spent around Clerkenwell, the northern part of Clerkenwell, sort of from St. John's Gate north. So this is the walk that Margot Bamborough was due to take, and we spend a lot of time there, and there's some quite detailed knowledge of the area. Those strikers that go to London on the pilgrimages, it's one of the things they have to do is follow that walk. If you are a Londonophobe like I am, then almost certainly you will have followed it on Google Street View, and it just shows you the detail that Rowling got right. So you can see the window where the schoolgirl thought she saw Margot Bamborough. It's just absolutely spot on. So am I claiming that J.K. Rowling knew this area before she started plotting Troubled Blood? I can't say definitely, but I think it's really likely. And the reason why I come to that is if you get a copy of the London A to Z and you flick through to that area of London, the route I think you would choose to go from St. John's Gate through to the Three Kings is not the route that Margot goes. So the Jerusalem passage is not obvious from that map. Okay. People don't use A to Zs anymore, not least because, as Matthew tells us, you look at an A to Z, everyone thinks that you're a tourist, they're going to mug you. So you'd be back at the office and you'd try Google Maps to find a route for you. Google Maps doesn't take you through Jerusalem passage. I think you need to know that area to know that's a good shortcut if you're a pedestrian going from St. John's Gate to the Three Kings. Okay, so can I put it close to there? Almost. So we found out actually where her flat was during the COVID lockdown. She posted a photograph of where it was, and it's in Clapham Junction. So it's the other side. It's away from the City of London. It's south of the river. It's quite some distance away, but where she worked, where she did a lot of temp work as a secretary, just as Robin did, but where we know she worked was Amnesty International. Now, Amnesty International is based in Easton Street in Islington. Islington is not Clerkenwell. But the Three Kings is not Clerkenwell either. The Three Kings is South Islington. It's right on the border between the two boroughs. Now, here's the thing. If you draw a line between the Amnesty offices in Islington and St. John's Gate on the map, straight ruler line, and you put a dot in the middle of that line, dead center, guess where we are? The Three Kings. So, and it's about an 8-minute walk at a brisk pace. It's about an 8-minute walk from St. John's Gate to the Three Kings, and from Amnesty International offices to the Three Kings is about an 8-minute walk in each direction. I don't think it's likely that J.K. Rowling on her hour lunch break would spend a 16-minute walk to get down to St. John's Gate and then back again. That's half her lunch hour gone, getting there and back again. But I think it's at least possible that she knew someone that was working in the St. John's Gate area, and a useful place for them to meet up for lunch would be the Three Kings. Now, as London prices being what they are, it's unlikely that, just as Strike in the early days couldn't justify a pub lunch every lunch, it's unlikely that J.K. Rowling could either. But there is also a nice open grassed area surrounding the church, St. James's Church, that is directly opposite the Three Kings. So it is still a convenient place for two people to meet for lunch. Now, we don't know what Michael was doing at that time. I still think of him without much justification as the accountant. And there are a lot of financial firms operating in Clerkenwell because it is the centre, it is the City of London. So that is the financial centre of the empire. Yeah, of the empire. Okay, so picture, if you will, J.K. Rowling. She's in her flat in Clapham Junction. Oh, the street. Have I mentioned the street in Clapham Junction that she lives in? It's St. John's Road, John. She leaves her flat in St. John's Road. She takes a shortcut. So the quickest route from her flat in St. John's Road to Clapham Junction Underground Station is Severus Road. She walks down Severus Road, hops onto the Underground that delivers her almost directly opposite where she works in Islington, And then in her lunch break, she walks south to the Three Kings, where she's met someone walking north from St. John's Gate, which is possibly how she understands that area of London.
Your detective work here, Nick, is as usual very impressive, to the point of astonishing. I do want to note that your first appearance at Hogwarts Professor has something to do with St. John's.
Oh yes,
Gate.
No, I didn't know St. John's Gate, but that architectural feature, which was sort of a fortified city building, is well known or in the UK is recognizable as being a city wall gate. So basically, I just did a Google image search for medieval gate, and St. John's came up.
Now, wait a minute. You haven't given any context for this. Rowling put up a sketch from a mid-19th century London Illustrated News picture. And I posted it at Hogwarts Professor and said, basically, what the hell is this? I mean, how can we find out what this is an illustration from? And I don't think I posted that. I don't think it had been up for more than 30 seconds. And all of a sudden, this unknown character comes up and says, oh, that's an illustration from London Illustrated News, 1858, March 3rd. It's on page 26. And here's what that's about. I was like, who the hell is this? I mean, I thought, I guess I got a mole inside Rowling's office or something. Who has done this? And that was the advent of the lake expert. that maybe a Ladunaphobe, but boy, you know that city. Thank you for doing that work. That's really, again, until we have the critical biography, until we have Rowling in a reflective mood, she's still in full-time writer and her power stage in terms of her influence politically. But if someday, if she gets into that reflective mode, I look forward to reading about Severus Street and St. John's Street and all these things. That's just golden. Wow. Again, Nick, you do these things and you say, I don't have much to say today, and I'm left doing I'm holding the thing. But today I have something that's important to me to talk about, because I want to talk about Spencer. I want to talk about how important this author is that we had no sign that she had studied or was familiar with, even though, clearly authors that she loved. You mentioned Tolkien. I mentioned C.S. Lewis. Really love the Faerie Queene. I want to talk about Oonaugh and the Redcrosse Knight, who are the stars of the Faerie Queene's first book. Okay. I'm going to theorize and try to demonstrate in something which is not demonstrable that the first book in Faerie Queene serves as something of a template, not only of Strike's Redcrosse Knight adventure in 2014, but also of the missing person case, Margot Bamborough's disappearance in 1974, that he's trying to solve 40 years later. The first book of Spencer's epic allegory has 12 cantos in which Redcrosse passes through the stages of transformation, leading from election to sanctification, according to the Protestant understanding of Spencer's time. Heale, Heale, one of those Spencer scholars, described this six-stage paradigm of salvation as a process beginning with election, calling, and repentance, continuing through justification and mortification by the intervention of grace, ending in regeneration and sanctity. I'm not gonna beat you over the head with that. But in brief, in the first book, the knight sets out with Oonaugh on a white donkey. Hold that donkey thought, right, Nick? And their dwarf on a quest to free her mother and father, who are a king and queen, from the castle in which a dragon is keeping them prisoner. The two are separated in the first canto and have independent, if related, adventures before their reunion in Canto 8. Redcrosse is repeatedly broken in consequence of his pride, but by book's end has been sufficiently tutored and transformed in the faith that he defeats the dragon after a 3-day battle. The discussion that greeted Spencer's Faerie Queene and how it works in the Troubled Blood story has largely been done by two Spencerian scholars, Elizabeth Baird-Hardy and Beatrice Groves. And it's largely turned on the parallels between Robin and Strike with the epics Britomart and Artegal, who are a man and woman knight, and their relationship is told extensively throughout the other books inside the Faerie Queene, not in the first book. And those are really important parallels, and you should go down below, see the links down there, and read those things. As important as those parallels are in understanding the romantic storyline of the series, Redcrosse Knight and Oonaugh deserve more attention, I think. I say that with fear and trembling. Anyway, Strike, unknowingly, of course, is both investigating a disappearance akin to Faerie Queene's first book, as well as living a parallel St. George's existence himself. The Redcrosse Knight finds out that he is, in a way, St. George. In something like Metafictional Cubed, Strike is within a book whose title and more than 80 epigraphs are taken from the Faerie Queene. He is investigating a crime in which the victim lived a life and met her death in parallel with the adventures and characters of the Faerie Queene's first book. And his life during this investigation becomes, in addition to being anteros to Robin's psyche per Spencer, the Redcrosse Knight of book 1 to her Oonaugh. Okay. In the narrative itself, epigraphs aside, only the surfeit of St. John's crosses and the Cratyllic names act there as hints or clues that the spiritual allegory and intratextual gymnastics is happening. So I'm going to try. All right, where do you choose to start with all that? Margot Bamborough, the general practitioner who disappeared in 1974, was a female Redcrosse Knight whose pride and Marmite kind of feminism led to her murder. That her life is meant to be read as an allegory along Spencerian lines is evident in her life having been dedicated to serving her parents, right, who are imprisoned by disability and poverty. That her best friend was named Oonaugh. It's spelled differently. It's given an Irish spelling, but it's homophonic with Oonaugh, U-N-A, of the Faerie Queene. And that Margot, her first name, means pearl. Perhaps the first allegorical poem of note, and a cryptonym pointing to her fate. She winds up as a pearl inside that cement box. Bamborough, too, according to Rowling's preferred reference text, the Oxford Dictionary of British Place Names, means the stronghold of a queen named Bebby, which is Elizabeth, who is the patron of Faerie Queene. Okay. Bamborough falls, as did Redcrosse, to carnal pleasures, she with the artist Paul Satchwell, and then to pride. So I should say Satchel, right? Paul Satchel is another name. It means little bag. It's a reference to his junk there, right? Anyway, Margot Bamborough marries into a much wealthier and Catholic family. Her husband's name, Roy Phipps, translates as King Phillips, who is the Spanish and Catholic king whose armada Queen Elizabeth's fleet had defeated only 3 years before the first version of Faerie Queene is published. The Bamborough-Phipps marriage was an unhappy one, and their manor home, though luxurious, has touchstones of Redcrosse's battle with Sansjoy, without joy. Most notably, that statue of Asclepius in the library, right? The god of healing, to whom Duessa and Night traveled to hell with the defeated Sansjoy for his restoration. Oonaugh described her friend Margot as miserable in the weeks before her disappearance. Margot met with Satchel twice, and he was as false as Duessa was with Redcrosse in Canto 7 of Book 1 of Faerie Queene. She fell, however, not again to sexual sin, but as Redcrosse did to pride. Orgoglio is an Italian word for pride. Margot told her husband and best friend Oonaugh that her experience in giving birth to her daughter Anna had changed her feminist views on abortion. But that wasn't the case. Margot coached a young pregnant woman, a receptionist at the St. John's Clinic, in relationship with a gangster, whose name allegorically means the devil, to have an abortion, lest she be trapped in a marriage to an abusive man. The Spenserian allegory, as uncomfortable as that is going to be for postmodern readers, suggests that Margot's murder by Janice was a judgment by God for this failing because of the circumstances in the clinic on the day of her disappearance. A woman from a traveler or gypsy family came in just as the office is closing for the day, and Margot was headed out to meet with Oonaugh, in which she wants to share what she suspects about Janice, I think. Kim Sullivan in the novel's denouement explained what had happened based on notes found in Margot's bag inside this cement, clam or oyster. The patient's full name was Theodosia Loveridge, and she was from a traveler family. This is again what Kim Sullivan is saying. Margot suspected an ectopic pregnancy and wanted to ring an ambulance, but Theo said her boyfriend would take her. Margot's notes suggested Theo was scared of her family knowing she was pregnant. Now, this mysterious last patient is only known as Theo throughout the novel, which means by God or from God. There's some confusion about whether it's a man or a woman. So it's like this hermaphroditic, God is transcendent, God is immanent type thing. Her full name, using Rowling's preferred surname reference text, means God's gift, beloved ruler. Margot's decision not to call an ambulance or to speak to Theo's boyfriend to explain to him what an ectopic pregnancy involved meant Theo's all but certain death. Along allegorical lines of Spenser's times, God appeared to Margot Bamborough after she had facilitated the death of an unborn child for the convenience of her receptionist in order to test the doctor's real concern for women. Oonaugh has explained that her friend was an atheist through and through. Is that a decent Irish accent, Nick? No. I can't do an Irish accent. Anyway, her faith really is in feminism. Margot, remember that Rowling has said that the book is about changes over time in feminism. Right? Margot failed this meeting with God or Theo, in which God died as a result of the doctor's decision to see her friend rather than to help the patient. Janice Beattie, the novel's Janice figure, Janice is spelled differently than the Duessa, Janus figure, but it's obviously pronounced the same. Janice Beattie captured and murdered Bamborough on her way to that pub, the Three Kings. Bamborough's demise as Redcrosse takes place at the equivalent of Argoglio's defeat of the night and is being poisoned by Duessa. Duessa was rewarded by Argoglio or Pride with the steed the Whore of Babylon rides in the Book of Revelation. All right. Now, Detective Inspector Talbot, practicing invocational magic at the height of his psychotic break, attempted to raise the spirit of the dead Dr. Bamborough and succeeded, in his own mind, in raising the Whore of Babylon, whom he saw as the demonic servant of Baphomet. If he had read less Aleister Crowley and more Edmund Spenser, he and then Strike and Ellicott, who see his drawing in the true book, would have recognized Duessa, the poisoner of Book 1, Canto 7, and her seven-headed beast, or Goglio's steed. That's such a crucial piece of the occult imagery inside that, and that it's central to the first book of Faerie Queene, really. Anyway, all of them attempt to read the embedded Faerie Queene in Troubled Blood using astrological tools of interpretation, which, though on the surface is preposterous, as I've said, is essential to understanding Spenser. Both Aleister Fowler, who is like the English literary geek about chiastic structures, and Dame Frances Yates, who is the goddess of esoteric interpretation of Shakespeare and this literature, though they differ in their assignment of Queen's 7 books to their corresponding planet, agree that the allegorical epic is built upon an astrological scaffolding. Margaret, and this would have been really current when Rowling, if Spenser was involved with her A levels or anything like that, or she just read it with Lucy Shepherd. Fowler wrote that book in 1964, so that it would have been really the hot item in Spenser studies, in which Spenser studies is like what's happened in the last century is current. Anyway, Margot Bam.
I think if Rowling was reading Edmund Spenser at a time in Wydeen, she was reading way beyond the syllabus. I don't think that would ever be touched in English A level. Yeah.
But Shakespeare is considered essential, and Spenser would not be.
Oh yeah. So Shakespeare, you do that earlier. You do Shakespeare in O level.
Okay. Whew. I'm thinking that all the stuff with the astrology involved with that, and Fowler's, who was one of the very few graduate students of C.S. Lewis. I'm thinking that there's a connection there. Another reason we need to find Lucy Shepherd to find out if Spenser was in there somehow. Anyway, or that if she encouraged her to read it. Maybe she was that, morbidly obese student that I met in school year. That she was the person that her favorite book was Faerie Queene. Anyway, Margot Bamborough was a heroic, if godless soul. In the psychomachic reading of her story as a soul-speaking spirit, she was captured and murdered because of her Marmite nature and pride on her way to see Oonaugh. The Oonaugh character, who the very night of Bamborough's murder is called to return to the worship and service of God. Oonaugh becomes an Anglican priest, and she had protected Margot, the precious soul, from Satchel, but was unable to save her from the consequences of pride. Okay, the characters inside Troubled Blood think that Margot was killed by Creed, the story stand-in for Spenser's dragon at the end of Queen's Book 1. She, however, had not made it past Queen's Canto Book 7, or Canto 7. Margot had a daughter she named Anna. One is that's suggestive of her best friend Oonaugh and Spenser's Oonaugh. Anna's almost 40 years old at the start of Troubled Blood, and she's told by a psychic medium that she would receive a leading soon to her mother's whereabouts. She acts on that when she runs into Strike and Cornwall pub. But, she looked like Oonaugh is described as Queen, having a pale face and wearing a black stole. And she's described as a look of intensity, even of fanaticism about her in the half-light, like a medieval martyr. When Strike told Anna how unlikely it was that the agency would find Margot, she thanked him in a way that, and this is a quote, he had the feeling that he had disappointed her, that she'd hoped he would make a promise of the truth, that he would swear upon his honor to do what everyone else had failed to do. In effect, just to make a knight's oath to her. Okay. However great that resemblance is, and as chivalric and medieval as it may seem to us, it's Robin who serves as Strike's Oonaugh on his unwitting Redcrosse spiritual quest. In parallel with the knight and his maid, Robin and Strike, for the first time in the series, are separated for long periods because of Strike's commitments to the Nancarrows in Cornwall as his Aunt Joan dies, and the torrential rains that fall throughout Blood trap him there. Robin has her epiphany in parallel with Oonah's before her knight confronts Orgoglio and is present in Strike's meeting with the monster at the American bar. Oakton and Rokeby both have names signifying oak trees, right? And Orgoglio's fearsome weapon is an oak club the size of a tree, right? Rowling is embedded in the names, the parallels with Faerie Queene. The fixed spirit kept Strike, the great-souled or proud man, from hitting Oakton, which would have meant his arrest. And then she counseled him in the agency office about sharing his burdens with her in conversation. In remorse and regret and love, he consented. This is very much like how Oonaugh guided her Redcrosse to his transformation in the House of Holiness. And after instruction there in humility, the cure to his pride, he is able to see his destiny as St. George, the patron saint of England. Robin trains Strike in humility herself, not only by her example, but in forcing him repeatedly to see what an arrogant, selfish hypocrite he could be. In the street after the Valentine's Day debacle, in the office after the American bar near disaster, and by her refusal to apologize or back down about having gone to St. Peter's to interview Ricci. And there's a big anti-Catholic thing going on inside Faerie Queene. It's Protestant. It's Elizabethan England, right? And they're warring with Catholic Spain. But the way they have St. Peter's set up and the Catholics in Troubled Blood, if you don't get the undercurrent about Catholicism, I don't know, you're being kind. You're thinking that Rowling can't say anything anti-Catholic because she layers it on there. Strike as a soul in transformation may not be destined to be a saint, but he is moved after his training in humility to sing the song of the Western man in recognition of his Cornish identity, something he denied having in the novel's first chapter, his conversation with Polwarth. Robin, as Strike's Oonaugh, too, is responsible for preparing him to meet the dragon at story's end, right? She clandestinely petitioned Broadmoor for access to Creed using her ministry contacts from Lethal White and interviewed Brian Tucker, from whom she gained the maps of the well and the forest that proved essential in solving Creed's riddle to Strike. The Redcrosse Knight is succored after the first day of battle with the dragon. He recovers in the well of life, and after the second day, by the tree of life. Only by being broken, as Redcrosse was in the fall of Duessa and Argoglio, and forsaking his pride, confessing and apologizing to Robin for abusing her at the Valentine's Day dinner party, for hitting her instead of Oakton at the American bar, and refusing to treat her as an equal, as an investigator, was he transformed and capable of transcending his positive bias to see the nurse is the killer and to slay the dragon Dennis Creed. All the witnesses the duo cannot find appear ex machina in the immediate wake of Strike's forsaking his pride and pledging his troth to the story equivalents of Oonaugh and Britomart, his partner, Robin Ellicott. Strike thanked her on her birthday, not only with the Narciso perfume discussed, but also with a donkey balloon. That donkey balloon again, not only of large animals, right, for that house, but the donkey balloon is a token both of Oonaugh's riding a donkey, no doubt, and of Robin's fond childhood memories of riding one at Skegness. He took her to the Ritz for champagne as well to show he remembered everything they had said the night he confessed she was his best mate, and she agreed. Now, people say that Oonaugh and Redcrosse Knight are married. They're not married. Okay. The perennialists say that this is Martin Lings. The essential feature of man's primordial state was the union of his soul with the spirit. And one of the most universal symbols of that regaining of that state is marriage, the union of lovers. And he mentions the Redcrosse Knight specifically on that point. A perfect woman may stand for the spirit. And in the Faerie Queene, the sequel to Redcrosse Knight's victory of the dragon is his marriage to the lady Oonaugh. Now, the knight and Oonaugh are betrothed. They're not married at the end of book 1, and this is a marker that there is a difference between the earthly and celestial paradises, the ends respectively of the lesser and greater mysteries of salvation and sanctification. I'm not going to go on. Okay. Oonaugh, who's the spirit in this relationship, is named for the one, which in Kirlot's Dictionary of Symbolism is equivalent to the center, to the non-manifest point, to the creative power of the unmoved mover. All right. And Scott says the center is an image of God. And that's what Oonaugh, that fixed point is. Oonaugh as spirit is fixed and perfect, and her betrothal to the knight is an affirmation of his soul's purification and near readiness for perfect union with the spirit. Robin and Cormoran have not yet pledged troth, but this is the path of spiritual transformation the novel is describing. The changes and growth in their relationship is traveling. The sole allegory of the Strike series is Robin and Cormoran playing soul and spirit to one another in this Shakespearean, marriage allegory. And they're betrothed in the fact that they're partners inside the relationship, but neither one of them has been perfected, so they're not yet married. And as you've theorized, Nick, we can see actually an ending in which they're never married, but in which they complement each other in this way, and so they have this spiritually edifying relationship, sans sexual congress and union. Oof. They didn't cancel you, Nick, when you theorized this. I bet they cancel me. They probably cancel me. Here I am saying all these nice things about Lindsay and how she saved me on my astrological thing. I'm afraid what the Strike Ellicott, harpies are going to do to me for saying that this book can end without them being, married or even in bed with each other. But really, again, Rowling's secret power in a way is her embedding exteriorizations of the soul's relationship with the spirit inside her books. We get that certainly in Harry Potter with the soul triptych, and we get that in Christmas Pig. We'll talk about that in the coming days. And we get it, I think, most obviously in the Shakespearean soul drama of Robin and Strike as soul and spirit to one another. And Rowling Galbraith chooses Spencer's Faerie Queene as the template on which to build that. She also uses, I think I promised to, there's so many things I promised to do in these Troubled Blood things, because that's also the mythological template of this series, which is the Cupid and Psyche. There's that scene, Nick, where they're in the agency office and it's dark in there and the lights come on. I mean, they're confessing to each other they're best mates and they're both thinking about the bedroom upstairs. And all of a sudden Barclay bursts in and turns the light on and you're shocked. And Robin's, euphoric. Barclay goes to do some paperwork with Strike in the inner office. And then Saul Morris shows up. Well, Saul Morris's name, he's just like Sirius Black. He's the Black Star, the Black Sun. His name means the Black Star. And he's Anteros. He's the love which is just sexual relations, carnal affection. And Robin pulls a knife on him. And the light and the knife are straight out of the Cupid and Psyche myth, all right? I mean, Rowling is doing astrological artistry. She's doing mythological artistry. She's doing straight template storytelling with modifications in using Faerie Queene's first book as her straight up model. This is shed work, Nick. And I don't think you read that story. Here's the real thing is, I don't think you read that book and say, oh, this is just way too sheddy.
No, you can't. You can't. But there is plenty of shed in there. You can't look at it and say there's too much shed, but there is plenty of shed, which is why I'm excited for tomorrow's episode.
Oh. What is tomorrow, Nick? What are we doing tomorrow?
It's time to jump back into that lake, John. We're going swimming.
Oh, is it Christmas Pig time? Is that what we're talking about?
It's the Christmas Pig. And there's so much lake, I'm not sure we can fit it into one episode. We're going to have to talk about this.
Let's talk about it. Christmas Pig, I think from the shed side, we have to talk about the Blue Bunny. Because the Blue Bunny...
How can you claim Blue Bunny for the shed when it's so lakey?
Well, that's great. How about the first talk we do? We'll talk about the Blue Bunny. Because the shed work that she does with this lake inspiration is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Especially the way the heavens open.
Yeah.
At the gates of the city, and I want to talk about that. Anyway, so really, this is fun week in our Kanreki celebration, and that we get Troubled Blood and Christmas Pig in the same week. We're gonna blow off the rest of these books. It's hot in here. I'm looking forward to that, and I think I can match. Yeah, you've got personal testimony from the presence herself about the lake elements in this stuff, but I think I can go toe to toe with you on the shed work involved in this book. Wow, I can talk to you about the Christmas tree, and I bet you haven't got any testimony about Rowling's Christmas trees.
I have photographs of Rowling's Christmas trees. I don't have, full confession, I don't have a photograph of Rowling's toilet roll angel, but it's just too ridiculous not to have been a real thing.
Okay. There's so much. There's
Yeah,
just the pigs. We talked about the blind pig in an earlier
yeah.
episode, I think. So I mean, all right. So I'm gonna go off and work and see if I can stay up with you because yeah, this is definitely a lake. Like it's this. But you just endured the shed Olympus of troubled blood. Um, I look forward to talking Christmas pig.
I'm looking forward to it too. Take care, John.